This is the Sutta Nipata, the Vasettha Sutta, number 9 of the Sutta Nipata. It is 2006, Dhammasukha Meditation Center, Jettis Grove, Ananthandika's Park. The Venerable Vimalaramsi.
This is called the correct definition of Brahman. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Buddha was staying at a forest with many Brahmins. Many Brahmins were staying there too, famous men like Chanki and so on, and Todia, all well-known, erudite and wealthy Brahmins. Among these men were also 2 young Brahmins, one called Vasettha and the other Brahmavihara. Now one day, as these 2 young men were walking up and down, they started a conversation regarding the factors that make one a Brahmin. Brajava, it's said it's to do with one's family. If one's family background is pure and there has been no intermarriage with other castes for 7 generations back, and on either one's mother's or father's side, then one is a Brahmin. Then Vasettha said, if one's actions are good and duties are observed, then one is a Brahmin. He stuck to his theory, and Vasettha stuck to his theory. Neither could convince the other that he was right, so Vasettha suggested that they go and ask someone else's advice. Listen, he said to, I hate these names, Bharadvaja. There is a hermit called Gotama, a prince of the Sakyas, who has renounced his family, and of whom it is said that Blessed One is such, since he is accomplished, fully enlightened, endowed with wisdom and conduct, sublime, the knower of the worlds, the incomparable leader of men to be tamed, the teacher of gods and men, enlightened and glorious. He, the Buddha himself, having realized the Dhamma, makes it known to the world of men and gods, including ascetics and Brahmins. He teaches the truth, which is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good at the end, full of meaning, rich in words, and wholly complete. He teaches a perfect, pure life. Good indeed is the sight of such saints. Well, Vasettha said, let's go to this man Gotama and ask him to clear up this question, and we will take it at the recluse Gotama, as the recluse Gotama explains it. Very well, let's go. So the 2 young men went off to look for this master. When they found him, they greeted him politely and sat down at one side. Then Vasettha spoke to the master in these words. Sir, we are both students of the orthodox teaching, and we are both recognized and accepted as experts in the study of the Vedas. My teacher and my friends study with Taruka. We've studied all of the commentaries on the 3 Vedas, and we're qualified to teach the subjects of meter, grammar, and chanting. But even so, Gotama, there is one question about which we are in disagreement, namely the importance of heredity. This monk insists that a man is a Brahmin because he is born as one, but I am sure that it's what a man does that counts. We want you, who have vision, to know about this argument. Because we can't settle it between ourselves, we've come to you to ask about it. We've heard that you're called a fully enlightened one. We are treated with respect by men. They fold their hands when they see you in the same way they go forth to respect the waxing moon. You are the eye of the world, Gotama. So we speak to you to look at this question. What is it that makes a man a Brahmin? Is it by birth, or is it by what he does? We can't work it out, Gotama, so please explain this to us and tell us what a Brahmin is. The Buddha answered in these words, I shall explain to you a proper or improper order and in accordance with the fact the different kinds of living beings, since they are diverse species. If you look at trees or grass, although they may not be conscious of it, there are lots of different kinds of species. There are diverse species. Then there are insects, large ones like moths and small ones like ants. With these creatures too, you can see that there are very different kinds and species. And the four-footed animals, whatever the size, you can see that they are of different kinds and species. Now look at the creatures that crawl on their bellies, the reptiles and the snakes. You can see that they are different kinds and species. Look at the fish in the water. Look at the birds and the breeds that fly. You can see there are different kinds and species. There is not among men different kinds and species in the manner that they are found among other species. Unlike in other species, there is not among men differences in the kind or species with regard to their eyes, ears, mouths, nose, lips, eyebrows, and even their hair. All are the same type. From the neck to the groin, from the shoulder to the hip, from the back to the chest, it's all one kind of men. Hands, feet, fingers, nails, calves, thighs are all standard. And so are the features of voice and of color. Unlike other creatures, men do not have characteristics which distinguish them at birth. They do not have the variety of inherited features that other creatures have. In fact, in the case of humans, differences are differences only by convention. For example, Vasettha, if a man keeps cows and lives off their produce, then we know that he is a farmer. We do not call him a Brahmin. Similarly, when a man lives by a particular craft, then we know him as a craftsman. We do not call him a Brahmin. If he supports himself by trading, then we know he is a merchant, not a Brahmin. When a man gets paid for serving other people, then we call him a servant. rather than a Brahmin. A man who lives by taking other people's things is known as a thief rather than a Brahmin. A bowman who sells his skill is known as a soldier. We do not call him a Brahmin. A man whose work is performing rites and ceremonies is known as a priest and not as a Brahmin. And the man who lives off the produce of countries and villages is known as the landlord or king. We do not call him Brahmin. I do not call a man a Brahmin because of his mother or because of his breeding. Just because a man is entitled to be called sir, it does not mean that he is free from habit and attachment. He who is free from attachment, he who is free from grasping, is the person I call Brahman. When all of the chains are shattered, when there is no more agitation, and a man has freed himself and thrown off his shackles, that is the person I call a Brahmin. He who has cut off the strap of ignorance and harness of false views, who has removed obstacles and is enlightened, is one I call a Brahmin. He who, without getting annoyed, endures insults and violence, whose strength and army is endurance, is one I call a Brahmin. There is no anger, there is no ignorance, there is only strength of restraint and the power of pure action. So there's no habitual repetition, no rebirth. This is what I call a Brahmin. If like a water drop on a lotus leaf, a mustard seed on top of a needle, sense desires roll off and leave no trace in him. In such a person I call a Brahmin. Losing weight and dropping a chain, here, right here in this world, he can see how even suffering has an end. This is whom I call a Brahmin. One who is deep in wisdom, wise, proficient in what the right and what the wrong path is, who has reached the ultimate goal, is one I call a Brahmin. No props, no dependency, no need to mix with other people, whether property owners or wandering monks, the minimum being good enough. This is what Brahman means. To lay down the weapons of violence, to stop killing any being, to stop causing others to kill any being. This is what Brahman means. He who shows no anger towards those who are angry, peaceful towards those who are violent, not grasping among those who are bent on grasping, is one I call a Brahmin. He whose wanting, hating, pride, and envy have dropped away, like a mustard seed which has rolled off the needle top, is one I call a Brahmin. He who speaks words which are not harsh, and words which are meaningful and true, words which do not rouse another's anger, is one I call a Brahmin. No possessions, no things have been appropriated, whatever the size, quantity, or value. This is what Brahman means. No expectations, not a hankering for this world or for any other. He is united, released. This is what Brahman means. An absence of wanting, questions and doubts disappear in knowledge, and he plunges into the absence of death. This is what Brahman means. He who has gone beyond the impurity of both merit and demerit, who is free from grief and defilement and is pure, this is what Brahman means. The clear, calm, stainless, moonlight quality where the shackles of constant becoming are cut and thrown away. This is what Brahman means. He who has gone beyond the rough and dangerous road of cyclic existence and delusion, who has crossed over and gone beyond the contemplative, passionless, and doubt-free, one who is calmed without grasping. He is one I call a Brahman. Sense pleasures are gone. He lets go for the life of the wanderer without a home. The sense pleasure of constant becoming has gone, thrown away. This is what Brahman means. Craving, demandings have gone. He lets them go for the life of the wanderer without a home. The hankering after constant becoming has gone, thrown away. This is what Brahman means. The dead weight on the backs of men, the loads that weigh down even gods, all of these burdens are discarded, thrown off and overcome. He's united from the yoke, released. This is what Brahman means. He's untied from the yoke, not united. Oops. A little bit. Avoiding delight and aversion, he is cooled and free from the bases that lead to rebirth. He's a hero who has overcome all of the worlds and is one I call a Brahman. He who has fully comprehended how beings come to be and how they cease to be is unattached, faring rightly and enlightened, is one I call a Brahman. He whose destiny cannot be known by gods and human beings, the person who has eradicated the passions. I would rather use the word extirpated, but a worthy one is one I call a Brahman. As for possessions, he has nothing. Nothing in the past, nothing in the future, nothing in the present. He does not hold on to anything at all. Freed from clinging, this is what I call a Brahman. A hero, a man of greatness, of prominence, of wisdom, a man of fearlessness and victory, non-attached, washed in the waters of wisdom, enlightened. That is what I call a Brahman. He knows his earlier lives. He has seen the other forms of life, the woeful states and the happy states. This is the attainment, reaching the end of the chain links of births. This is what I call a Brahman. So what of all these titles, names and races? They are mere worldly conventions. They have come into being by common consent. This false belief has been deeply ingrained in the minds of the ignorant for a long time, and still these ignorant ones say to us, one becomes a Brahmin by birth. On the contrary, no one is born a Brahmin. No one is born a non-Brahmin. A Brahmin is a Brahmin because of what he does. A man who is not a Brahmin is not a Brahmin because of what he does. A farmer is a farmer because of what he does. And a craftsman is a craftsman because of what he does. A merchant, a servant, a thief, a soldier, a priest, or a king. Each of them is what he is because of what he does. So the wise men see action as it really comes to be. They are proficient in the fruits of action, and they are seers of dependent origination. It says that. Would I be reading it if it didn't? The world exists because of causal actions. All things are produced by causal actions, and all beings are governed and bound by causal actions. They are fixed like the rolling wheel of a cart, fixed by the pin of its axle shaft. A Brahmin is a result of self-restraint, wholesome living, and self-control. This is the essence of Brahman. So, Vasettha, let this be clear. There are people who are wise and experienced in all three areas of knowledge. They are like the Vedas, who are calm and have finished with the chain links of repeated becoming. These people should be known like Brahma and Indra. Then the two men said to the Buddha, "It is amazing, Master Gotama, it is wonderful." Master Gotama, just as one might raise what has been overturned, or revealed what had been hidden, or pointed out the way to him who has gone astray, or hold a lamp in the dark for those who have eyes, may see objects, so likewise has the Dhamma been explained by the Venerable Gotama in various ways. Therefore we take refuge in him, in the Dhamma and his Sangha. May the Venerable One accept us as lay followers who henceforth have taken refuge in him for the rest of their life. Interesting sutta.
Did it say in the front part they follow with wisdom too? The front part of that sutta, and then did he use that term first?
He talked about wisdom in here. It must have been after all of the beasties he was talking about. If a man, these are the livelihoods.
Is there any historical commentary on the context of that sutta?
Not that I know of.
I thought that something like that during the Buddha's time was a real statement of his position on the caste system.
Yeah, and he was continually fighting against it.
Yeah, and he was fighting against it, and this would be a sutta that would be exemplary for those who would be seeking to be in the Brahmin caste by joining his monastic order.
Yeah. But his definition.
The word Brahmin is not the same as Brahmin caste, right?
Right.
It gets kind of confusing because.
Well, his definition of Brahmin has been. I just went through the whole definition.
Right, but I'm saying that by him providing a new definition of what that was, he was attacking the existing definition
Yes.
in the society.
Yes.
And creating a source of freedom and a new way of being for these people that chose to join his way of thinking.
Yes.
Absolutely. He was an actor.
And that's one of the reasons why an awful lot of the Brahmins didn't really like him very much. Because they were, say you had a bad dream, and you'd come to me as a Brahmin, and you'd say, I had this bad dream, please interpret it. And I would say, well, this dream means that you have to sacrifice 300 cows and 400 goats, and then you won't have any ill effect from that bad dream. And then I get to eat all of it. But the thing that made them the Brahmins was their, it was like a secret order for their ceremonies. They would do ceremonies, and they would have you put up a tent, and then they would do their little ceremony, whatever it happened to be, hidden from everybody else. And then they would come out and they would look very pious and say, now it is done.
That was one of the issues with the way that he was teaching. There are no secrets in what the Buddha was teaching, and he put that out to
But it's real interesting, the history of all of this stuff. And during the time of the Buddha, in all of the different villages and towns and cities, they had a gathering place that was always open for any ascetics to come, and they could just sit down and start talking whatever they were talking. And if there was ascetics from two different traditions, they would sit down and have an argument. And the Buddha was always going to this, looking for somebody to try to provoke an argument, and he wound up converting them. It happened a lot. But this whole idea of going down to the seventh generation, that's how they figured out that they were the pure ones. And they would talk about, my mother was so pure that I was not reborn where she goes to the bathroom, I came out of her side. Which means basically that they cut them open and took them out. Cesarean. I couldn't think of the word. And the doctors of the time were good enough that they did that sort of thing. Jivaka, he took care of the Buddha. He performed brain surgery on somebody that had worms in their brain, and they lived. And think about that. They didn't have real sharp tools like we got right now. But he when he was studying to be a doctor, his final exam was, the guy that was teaching him gave him a shovel and said, any plant that you can find in the forest that doesn't have a healing quality, I want you to bring it back. And he went looking for all these different plants, and he couldn't find one. And when he came back without one, then his teacher said, now you can go out and start practicing, because you understand how the herbs work. But he could heal leprosy. He could heal cataracts in the eyes. He could do all kinds of wonderful things with his knowledge of herbs and how to use them. And he was real big on ghee. He'd have people pour ghee in their nose and come out their mouth and things like that to purify them. But there is a few things in here about wisdom, but it talked directly about dependent origination. And as much as dependent origination is talked about in all of the suttas, you would think that people by themselves would be able to see that this is important stuff. We have to understand this.
But they've been guided around it.
They've been guided so that they don't go to the books.
That's right, even the monks.
Well, the monks go to books, but they're particular books. The Thais go to, what's the name of that college? Chaumalong or something like that. I can't remember the name of the college. But I've talked to monks that have gone there, and then they go to the meditation center in Chamtong at Vipassana, and they start doing the Vipassana. And I went there one time with my middle length sayings, and I started talking with this one monk, saying, it says this here. Now, his English was good enough, so he really did understand me. And it says that you have to relax on the in-breath and relax on the out-breath, and that's how you do the practice. And he said, where did you see that? What book is that? And I said, it's the middle length sayings in the suttas. And he said, I've never read any of that. Now, he just graduated from 4 years of college. He was taught inside and outside Abhidhamma, Visuddhimagga. That's all that he knew. After 4 years, he knew Pali. No, not right now. No.
Well, was he, which order of the monks was he? Was he wouldn't dominate?
No. But look at what Ajahn Boa says. You start reading his books, and he's talking about one-pointed concentration, up one side and down the other.
But when it was put on the same level as suttas, then that's the excuse for doing this curriculum this way.
And that's the way Usilananda learned it. That's why it blew my mind when he took my book, which was so different from what he was teaching, and put it online. Then he told me that he agreed with what I was teaching, but he couldn't stop teaching what he had been teaching.
He was more interested in the suttas.
That's rare from what I found in the Thai traditions. I spent time with the Dhamma-Yud as well as the Mahanikai. And there's a lot of pride on both sides. I'm this and I study that. But when they get right down to it, they're just following the same old path. I mean, the big monk, the one that had all of the psychic abilities, Ajahn Mun.
Yeah.
Well, you read the kind of practice that he had, and it was one-pointed concentration. He was just very sensitive to feelings, so he could read thoughts and other things like that.
Yeah, when reading his autobiography, which is quite fascinating.
Oh, it was great fun to read, but I wouldn't use it as a guide for my practice. But they considered him an arahat, I don't believe it. He talked about having visions of the Buddha coming and teaching him, and other arahats that are dead and gone that were come and teach him. That sounds odd to me. And then there's that tradition where they have the crystal ball that you visualize with the Buddha inside holding a crystal ball, and then you go into that crystal ball and there's another Buddha holding a crystal ball, and you keep going and going and going. And they flat come out and say the only way you can be an arahat is while you're meditating. And this was very famous. And you see a picture of the guy that started that tradition. He's got deep lines in his forehead. I mean, deep.
The one that's sitting behind the one that's here.
Yeah. And that's what happened to the Thai tradition, because they started to get into more and more magic and went away from Buddhism. And in the 50s and the 60s, Buddhadasa started coming. He went and he studied the suttas for 5 years. And then he started teaching, and it was so different from what the norm was that it really upset a lot of monks. That's why he could never be the abbot of a monastery. They would have taken it away from him right straight away. He was just a monk. And he happened to come across another monk that was a very, very good organizer. And he was very politically correct in a lot of ways. And he let Buddhadasa stay at Suanmok, where he is. Can't think of his name right off. But a lot of the people, they were into going to the monk to get the magic, to have something happen the way they wanted it to happen. And then it did involve having some people die. And monks were doing that sort of thing. They wouldn't do it themselves, but they would tell the person exactly what had to be done. When Buddhadasa came around and started talking about Buddhism, it was such a shock to so many people, because they didn't know what Buddhism was at that time. Because the Buddhism had become corrupt in the south. There were monks in Thailand that, in the south of Thailand, that they say they were Mahayana, but I don't know whether that's really true or not. But they would sleep with a woman right after she got married and take her virginity and get paid to do it. I mean, great job if you can get it, right? It's a real scam, but that's how far Buddhism had fallen. And when Buddhadasa came around, he started telling people, it says this in the suttas. And he could back it up by going to the suttas and saying, see, it says that right here. He pretty much single-handedly turned all Buddhism around in Thailand. And they still practice their magic stuff. But he was truly a great man. And he had this little tiny hut. And he had a porch but he had so much stuff on the porch, there was just enough room for him to come and sit down in a chair. But you didn't have enough room to bow. And that drove the Thai people crazy. Because they're bowing machines. They love to do their bowing, and that's the way that it is. And I went to see him at his hut, and I looked around, no place to bow, so I didn't even make a big deal of it. Just put my hands together, said, "How are you, Venerable Sir?" And then we started talking. His English was maybe 6th grade English. It wasn't great, but he got his ideas across. And I practiced with him for about 6 weeks, I guess. I kept on asking him to teach me the Brahmaviharas, and he kept saying, "I don't know the Brahmaviharas."
So where did you finally end up doing that?
I went to Malaysia, to the Malaysian Buddhist Meditation Center, MBMC, in Penang. I took one of Mahasi Sayadaw's books. Of course, I've been doing metta for a long time. I was doing metta with Manindra in 76 when he came. And I've been practicing off and on. I just wanted to do extended period. I'd just gotten kicked out of Burma. And I'd spent 8 months there, and I still had more to do, and I knew it, so I was trying to get back into Burma, and it took me almost 2 years to get back. Anyway, I went to MBMC. I told Dhammapiya, who's one of those monks in there, who was the head monk at that center. I told him I didn't want to do Vipassana. I just got through done 8 months Vipassana. I wanted to practice Brahmaviharas. He said, "Fine, but you're going to have to do it on your own." And I said, "That's no problem." So I took Mahasi Sayadaw's book and I read it for a little while, and then I went to the Visuddhimagga and I read what it said there, and I just kind of threw them both away and did whatever felt right. And that's when I did that for a little over 6 months. But I got a real strong reputation because I was able to sit for 4, 5, 6 hours. And just radiating loving kindness. As soon as I walked into the room, I could feel the loving kindness just permeate everything. And of course, everybody liked that too. So, and there was all kinds of things going around about what jhana I was in, and ooh, ah, isn't this wonderful, and all of this sort of thing. So when I started teaching the loving kindness, when I went from there, I went to Subang Jaya, the small temple there, and then they called it the Buddhist Graduate Fellowship. And it was all these people that had gone to college and they'd practiced Buddhism in college, and they got together every now and then, and there was 60 or 70 of them. And they asked me to come and give 3 talks a day for, I think it was 3 days. And they wanted me just to talk on loving kindness. So I dropped the Mahasi style of teaching and just started developing my own style of this is how you do loving kindness, and you have to soften your mind. Remember, I used to say that a lot, soften your mind, soften your mind. And the last day what I did was I had everybody get in a circle. And then I took one person that she was really having a rough time. Her life was in the pits. So I had her get in the middle, and I said, I want all of you now to radiate loving kindness to her all at the same time. And she was pretty much overwhelmed by that much loving kindness and couldn't believe how good she felt. And then she started crying, and that made me smile really heavy. And then she got out, and I said, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, everything is great. I've never. This is the best thing I've ever run across." And I started talking to them about. I imagine some of you people are thinking, "What kind of a compassionate monk am I?" Because I'm really smiling heavy, and she's crying. But I said, I know what was happening with her. She was letting go of a lot of old stuff, and that made me happy. So all of a sudden, 10 people, I want to be in the middle. I said, okay, get in there. Well, and then we did by tens until everybody got a feel for it. And they were all overwhelmed with how strong the loving kindness really is when you have that many people directing it towards you. Mm-hmm. That retreat made me incredibly famous because everybody went all over the country, and that's all they could talk about. And then I started getting invites to all over the country, and I started teaching the retreats. But I used to tell people, you got to soften your mind. Soften your mind. Then I went to Burma, and 2 years later I came back, and then I started doing the sutta studies, and then I started reading the suttas during the Dhamma talk, and all of a sudden people are getting into jhana left and right, and I started changing the word from soften to relax, and they were getting it. And that's why there was sometimes, most of the time, I didn't want to give a retreat more than 25 people, but sometimes they talked me into it. And I'd give a retreat, a weekend retreat for 60 people. Like to kill me. I mean, it was so many people. I was talking to people the whole time, and then I had to give a Dhamma talk. It was really hard, but the benefits that people were having from this, I mean, Chief Reverend was taking notice of that, and they really started to like it. And then they would go off and they would do a Vipassana retreat, and they would come back from the retreat and they would be really hard. And they would start saying things that were kind of nasty to other people and offending other people, and they had such heavy judging minds. They would come running to me and say, "Please, when is your next retreat? I have to practice with you."
For the balance.
Yeah. So they'd come for a week, and they would start relaxing, and they'd start having the loving kindness, and then they would drop that practice and go back to the Vipassana. And I kept on saying, why are you doing that? You're practicing the Vipassana when you're doing this, when you do it the way I'm showing you. And they never got that, because it had been so ingrained from the Vipassana that there are two kinds of meditation, and the two shall never meet. And a lot of people that practice the one-pointed concentration, they go through periods of time where they have these massive headaches and they walk around complaining. And I'm walking around doing the same, saying, that never happens when you practice this kind of jhana. But they've been ingrained from the time they were born now, really. But it always surprised me that they would go back to doing the Vipassana. It was always a shocker to my mind. You're so successful doing this. Look at how peaceful and calm you are. Look at the end of the retreat, how you felt. And you're smiling and you're happy and your mind is in balance. And you can take that to work with you. And everybody at work is starting to look at you going, you're different now. What did you do? Doesn't that mean something? You know, I kept on asking them. Well, it's a good practice, but it doesn't lead to Nibbana. Oh, but I proved that it did. And I even had students that had that experience. But they were so critical. Well, how can she act that way, or how can he act that way if he's had this experience? Give me a break. You don't know what a person is supposed to act like, but it's all projection.
This is just a meditation, and we do this meditation. That's that, and this is the meditation.
Well, this is one of the things that I really notice with Vipassana people, especially people that have been doing it for a long time, is the retreat is a retreat, and life is going to be lived the way I've always lived it. I don't care.
I was shocked.
They're not so much.
It's always true. I think there's a lot of those people that really want to bring the.
But they don't know how to do it.
That may be, but it's not that they don't want to.